If I was to say silver is not a very wise or good investment to make, and it's also pretty impractical, a lot of you probably shout at me, but give me a moment, please, because we've got a real world example of a gentleman trying to sell 95 kilos worth of silver and really struggling to do so. So let's delve into a real world example of why silver isn't actually as great as you might think in larger quantities. Hello everybody, Backyard Bullion here, and welcome to another Precious Metal Ramble. Silver is really not a very practical investment, certainly when you start having larger quantities of it, and it can be a little bit of a liability. Now, I know a lot of our hardcore silver stackers out there will probably take a little bit of umbrance with me saying things like this, because silver is, I think, a really interesting metal for the future. I think it's got a lot of potential, but in larger quantities it can be very impractical, both from points of storage, but most importantly of liquidating and selling. Now again, if you're a hardcore stacker that you never plan to sell any of this stuff, then maybe that's not an issue for you. But a lot of people maybe don't plan to sell, but are forced to sell, or life changes and they want to sell. And that's what's happened to an individual who is trying to sell 95 kilos of silver at the moment and is struggling, has had a pretty hard time of things over on eBay, which is unsurprising, but we'll talk a little bit about the woes of selling on eBay. He's been scammed by a few buyers, which is not great at all, and then is struggling even to sell large quantities of it on social media, like the Silver Forum and other places, just because of the volume and there's elements of the seller, wanting to sell it all in one go. £57,000 worth, by the way, is not something that everybody has lying around underneath the sofa, but even so, the backup option there is to sell to a dealer, and he's, I think, experiencing quite a lot of low ball offers from a lot of the dealers out there. So there's a lot of learning points to be had here, and I don't mean this video in any way to be disparaging towards the seller himself and the choices and decisions that he's made, or even against anybody else out there that wishes to stack silver in this kind of volume or way. It's just my thoughts and opinions and learning on the subject, and I'd love to know what yours are. So please feel free to comment down below, and don't forget to hit the thumbs up button. So for context, what we see on the table here is, so we've got 3.1, 6.2, 7, 8, 9.2 kilos worth of silver. So if you could imagine this multiplied by 10, so all of these stacked up 10 times, that's a lot of silver. 95 kilos is a humongous weight. And I've said before, silver I think is an impractical investment in terms of storage and logistics of posting, and I think this individual is experiencing that, certainly. And while storage, maybe, you can argue, yeah, okay, it's quite a lot of weight, but in terms of the volume of that weight, it's not horrendous. You can store that in a safe somewhere, you get a decent sized safe, it would be all right. But ultimately, it's not really about the storage, it's about the releasing of the money at the other end. And this individual that's looking to sell is looking to move the money out into other parts of life. And whilst a lot of people, and I'm sure there are a lot of you out there now watching, will say, but I never plan to sell my silver, it's going to be with me forever, and I'm going to put it into, my children's inheritance. Maybe some of you wonderful American viewers won't say it with quite so posh a toff accent, but you get my point. It's something that a lot of people don't necessarily plan to do. But at the end of the day, life changes. Life can throw huge curveballs to anybody in this world, and it might be required that one day you sell some of that silver. And how you get out of this precious metal, I think, is fascinating. Now, not everybody can be as lucky and fortunate to stack 95 kilos of silver, of course. But one thing to bear in mind is that even if you are stacking 1 ounce silver coins on a monthly basis, over a long period of time, you'll end up with an awful lot. It really doesn't take a great deal to really volume up. And I experienced this early on within our own personal silver stacking. And, quickly moved to gold, to be quite frank. Gold really is the only option, in my opinion, if you're worried about that kind of volume, the storage, and everything else as well. So from this own seller's perspective, storage probably wasn't an issue. He's obviously had it somewhere for a while and has been able to store it and keep it, and is now looking to sell it. Some of the things that he's got within this listing of 95 kilos are 5 kilo bits of silver, 5 kilo Umicore bars, and a whole bunch of other 1 kilo bars. And selling those are interesting, but at the same time, you need to find somebody with that amount of cash to buy them. And that's the big issue here. The resellability of these items often are seen as difficult. People want to have coins. Certainly here in the United Kingdom, the general ethos is bars are not great. They're not capital gains tax exempt. They are, they're big, thick, chunky. There's a risk element to them that they could not be completely pure silver, and not anybody, or everybody I should say, has the ability to test them. And even if you do have a Sigma machine, there's no way that Sigma is going to be able to tell you whether or not there's a lead core in any of these bars. So you have to have a leap of faith somewhat in these types of things, and it could very well be that one of these bars has got a lead core in them. I doubt it highly, but theoretically it could be possible. So you are faced with a difficult sell at the other end, and unless it's a really sort of well-recognized brand or bar with a sort of desirability factor to it, you're gonna get a low price for it. That's just the nuts and bolts of it. Now here in the UK, we pay tax on silver when we buy it. Now there's a good chance that this seller didn't pay a lot of tax on it when he bought it, because at the time probably bought a lot of it from Europe and had it come in VAT free, or maybe he just bought them secondhand. I don't know. I'm not privy to that information. But for whatever reason, he is now looking to sell. And he wants to get the prices which you see that come up every now and again. So on the Silver Forum, it's very common that you'll see a 1 kilo bar of silver go for anywhere from 600 to 700, depending on its type and how it looks and what brand it is and so on. Even with metal prices right now, that's a pretty good premium over spot for a seller to get. If you took it to a dealer, you'd be looking at probably spot price if you're lucky. Certainly in maybe the 95 kilo volume, you'd maybe get spot price for these things. But also, many dealers out there, they don't like big bars like this. All they do is send them off to a refinery for melting down, because they can't really sell them on particularly interestingly, because again, you've got to remember that these have to be taxed when sold. Theoretically, the sellers could do the VAT margin scheme for second-hand goods, but it is not very common. It's often fraught with lots of different administrative burdens for people. So you get these at spot, usually for a dealer, maybe less, because the dealers, if they're going to sell it, they're going to make a profit. If they're not going to sell it retail, they're going to send it off to a refinery, and they're going to need to get a little bit from their end for the worthwhile. So you see the problem here. You've got 95 kilos of silver, and at best you're going to get spot if you need to sell it in a hurry. So the solution here, I'm afraid to say, is gold. It really is. eBay is one of these interesting things, which we will just touch on now. So the seller originally tried to sell on eBay, and I think he had a very established eBay page with numerous different bits of feedback on it for many years, which is great. Not necessarily all of it or any of it would have been for precious metals, I guess, but with the way that eBay is right now, you can't even see feedback longer than 12 months ago, so you wouldn't even know whether it's something relevant to the particular items you're selling. But again, the problem with eBay is it's just a place for scammers to get you, and this gentleman, I think, found that out pretty soon. So he's going through a few disputes on eBay, I think, at the moment, from what I understand. I don't really want to pass judgment or comment on those. But you see the point here that it's very easy. I've talked about it in the past. Very easy for buyers on eBay to take advantage of sellers. And I think, from what I understand, this gentleman has had a brick sent back to him from one of the buyers. So he pilfered away a kilo bar, and then you got to go through all of the eBay palavers of trying to work out what's actually happened, and it's very difficult to do. So eBay, yes, you can get great prices, and a lot of people think, I'm just going to sell all my stack on eBay. It'll be great. It really isn't, and it's not that simple. It just takes one bar. Can you imagine if you had a 100-ounce bar here sold on eBay that was then essentially stolen from you, or the case was brought against you from the buyer and they sided in the buyer's favour? Because let's be quite frank, they do that 99.9% of the time. It's $2,500 gone probably that you've been paid, and that's just wiping out all the rest of your profit. So what's the point? eBay is a minefield and a nightmare, in my opinion. So yeah, what do we learn? We learn that gold is better. So here's the other thing. The seller has tried to list all of this stuff on the Silver Forum, and he's listed it all in one go. He's saying he wants one buyer, essentially. to buy £57,000 worth. Now, I don't really want to pass judgment on the tactics of the seller, but my advice to them would be to try and split things up a bit. You want the best value for money, you want the least hassle for your money, but as with all of these things, as I've said for a lot of the time, you've got to work for these extra premiums that you want to get out of your silver. If you just take it to a dealer, you're going to get spot or less than spot. You're going to be shocked by it. If you want to sell it on the private markets, then you're going to have to put the legwork in. You're going to have to put the legwork in. There's no other ways about it. And I feel like for me, in my own personal situation, if I was to try and sell these bars now, I could, and I would probably get a better price than I could from dealers, but I would have to put the legwork in. I'd have to try and research every single bar, see what the prices are, list them, photograph them. I'd sell them individually. I wouldn't try and get one person to buy 9 kilos of silver all in one go. And then posting 9 kilos worth. Do you meet somebody? That's a risk. Do you go and take payment in cash, physical cash? No. Banks transfers when you're meeting somebody. Is it there? Is it done? Is it cancelled? All of these things that you have to ask yourself as a seller, and that's just so impractical. So for me, in my own personal stack and situation, the silver that I have is very much seen as this. It's not the emergency asset. The gold is the emergency asset. If something happened in my life tomorrow that we needed the cash that we've not already budgeted for, and by the way, that is the other thing to do here, is to really understand that you should not be cashing out of your metals unless you are planning to do so. So if there was an emergency, we've already got that safety net of funds, that safety net of, we don't need to go and jump out of gold right now. But life does sometimes throw you sideways when you're not expecting it, and it is not uncommon. It happens more often than you think. So for me, the gold is the way to go. I can get certainly close to spot price, very much even above spot price of some of these coins from dealers, and it would not even be a question of whether they would take them. They would, and they do. So for me, if I had £57,000 worth, I know I would put it into essentially a kilo of gold. We've got 95 kilos of silver there. You only look at the ratio right now, 95 to 1, probably a little bit more. So maybe with the VAT premiums, you're probably looking at 70 to 1, but let's just call it spot prices. Right now, about 90 to 1. I would rather have a kilo gold bar than 95 kilos of silver. I think that would be very, very clear for me. Now, that doesn't all really take into account that, silver could very well be a very, very good performing asset to have in the future. And that's one of the reasons why I think that the stuff that I've got, the stuff that I stack like this, the big bar form, it doesn't matter if it's not coins. It doesn't matter if it's got less liquidity right now for me compared with gold, because I am prepared to hold this for the opportune moment. And when that opportune moment comes along, depending on the situation and the circumstances, whether I sell it to a dealer for that spot price, but it's still meeting my expectations, or whether I put the additional legwork in to try and get a little bit higher of a price, I feel that I can do that, and I will be doing that at some point in my life. But the money that I get from this will be turned into this. So I see my silver as gold in waiting, and it's my way of being able to buy more gold in the future without having to outlay even more cash than I would like to within the precious metals that I stack. So I hope that makes a lot of sense to people, but I do think it was a really interesting case, and one which, I think that we can certainly reflect on as stackers everywhere. I think even if you are one of these people that just don't ever want to sell your silver, you've got to understand that there might be a situation where it could be required. And this gentleman, just put it into perspective, this gentleman is asking $57,000 for 95 kilos. So that's £600 a kilo. So divided by 2.15, that's £18.66 an ounce that he's asking for, which is, of course, significantly over spot. If he was to get spot price for this from a dealer, depending on silver, he'd be looking at losing out £6,000-7,000, probably a bit more than that, to be quite frank. So there is a lot to be said about the ways in which we can sell, and I think a lot of people don't fully give it the full thought it deserves. It's one of the most important things, I think, for stacking silver and gold. So I hope you guys have had a fun little video. If you are watching to the end, thank you. You are one of the cool kids club. Thank you. I appreciate it. Let me know your thought down in the comments and give us a shout out if you're a Backyard Bullion Rambling Society member. It's always nice to hear from you all. Otherwise, that's it from me. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up on the way out if you've enjoyed the video. We'll see you on the next one. As always, please make sure that you like, share, comment, and subscribe for more.